July 6, 1992, a Tuesday night. A woman named Nona Stamey Cobb was at the Welcome Center on Interstate 85 in Cleveland County, North Carolina. Witnesses saw her get into a truck with a man they didn't recognize. The next morning, at 6:15 a.m., her body was found on the side of Interstate 77 in Surry County, over 100 miles from where she'd been last seen. She had been strangled. For the next 3 decades, nobody went to prison for it. The case went cold, and the man who killed her drove on. He had done this before, and he would keep doing it. 29 years later, through a DNA genealogy company, a cold case unit, and one preserved piece of evidence, investigators found him. Retired from the road, living quietly in Mississippi. His name is Warren Luther Alexander, and when North Carolina's arrest unlocked his DNA and put it into the national database, it didn't just solve one murder. It opened a window into 15 years of killing across 2 states. Welcome back. Today we're heading to Surry County, North Carolina, and this story is bigger than it first appears. On the surface, it's a 1992 cold case murder of a woman found on an interstate, but underneath it is a pattern that law enforcement now recognizes all too well: the highway serial killer. A long-haul trucker using the American road system as both his hunting ground and his escape route. By the time North Carolina solved Nona Stamey Cobb's murder in 2022, the dominoes it knocked over reached all the way back to 1977 and all the way across the country to California. This is the story of Nona, the investigation that took 30 years to crack her case, and the man who appears to have been killing women on American highways for at least 15 years without anyone connecting the crimes. You need to know who Nona was before you hear what happened to her. Nona Stamey Cobb was 29 years old in the summer of 1992. She was a widow. She was a mother. Her little boy Josh was 3 years old, and she'd lost custody of him about 7 months before that night. Her sister Vicky and Vicky's husband were raising him. Nona was struggling. That was the reality of her life in 1992. Drug problems, hard times, the kind of circumstances that sometimes put a person in the wrong place, in the path of someone dangerous. But Vicky Gregory never saw her sister's struggles as the whole story. She loved us, and we loved her, Vicky said in 1992 when police came calling. Just because you do something wrong doesn't mean you stop loving her. She loved Josh, was very proud of him. Nona called every day to ask about her son. She may have been in a hard chapter of her life, but she was also a mother who loved her child, and a sister who kept in touch, and a woman who deserved to go home. She didn't. The evening of Tuesday, July 6, 1992, Interstate 85. The Welcome Center in Cleveland County, near Kings Mountain, North Carolina. This was a standard interstate rest stop, exactly the kind of place where truckers pulled off to sleep, stretch their legs, fuel up. And it was exactly the kind of place where, in that era, exchanges happened. Witnesses were around. But witnesses don't always register what they're seeing until it's too late. Witnesses saw Nona Cobb at that Welcome Center. They saw her get into a truck with a man. They couldn't identify him. They didn't know his name or his plates. She drove away in that truck and was never seen alive again. The next morning, July 7, 1992, at 6:15 a.m., a body was found. The northbound way station on Interstate 77 in Surry County, near the small town of Elkin, northwest of Winston-Salem. Nona Cobb. Strangled, left on the side of a highway, over 100 miles from where she had been seen the night before. The autopsy confirmed what the scene suggested. This was a homicide. But who had driven her there, and why, and where that truck had come from? None of that was answerable in July of 1992. The Surrey County Sheriff's Office opened the investigation. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation came in to assist. They did what you do: canvassed the area, interviewed people, followed leads. For several years, nothing broke. And then, in 1995, something interesting happened. An Asheboro, North Carolina truck driver named Sean Patrick Goebel was identified as a person of interest in Nona Cobb's death. He fit a profile, a trucker, working routes through the region with a history of violence. Investigators questioned Goebel. They took his DNA. It wasn't a match. But here is where the case gets strange. Because Sean Patrick Goebel was in fact a killer. Just not Nona Cobb's killer. In 1995, Goebel was convicted of the murders of 3 women, all killed in a pattern eerily similar to Cobb's case. Sex workers, picked up along highways, transported, and killed. His victims included Brenda K. Hagee, Sherry 2 Mansour, and Alice Rebecca Haynes. A 4th victim, a Florida woman, was found in Guilford County, North Carolina. In other words, the investigators had found a serial killer trucker operating along the same highway corridors, targeting the same type of victim, in the same era. But he wasn't the one who had killed Nona Cobb. They were looking at the right pattern, but the wrong man. And the right man kept driving, kept living. Eventually, retired to Mississippi and grew old, the Cobb case went cold. For the next 2.5 decades, the file stayed open in theory. In practice, it moved nowhere. Then, in April 2021, the Surrey County Sheriff's Office and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation made a decision: reopen the case with fresh eyes and fresh technology. Physical evidence from the 1992 crime scene had been preserved. Biological evidence collected from the crime, evidence that had existed since the night Nona Cobb was found, had waited, sealed, for the technology to catch up with it. That technology existed now. Investigators partnered with Identifinders International, LLC, a forensic genealogy company based in California, founded by Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick. Identifinders had built a reputation for doing exactly this: taking old crime scene DNA, running it through genealogy databases, building out family trees, and narrowing suspects to a name. The work took months, but the result was a name. That name was Warren Luther Alexander. He was 71 years old. He was living in Diamond Head, Mississippi. He had once been a long-haul truck driver. He had once been a U.S. Marine. He had once lived in Oxnard, California. He had, by law enforcement's account, never been on anyone's radar for Nona Cobb's murder. On March 15, 2022, 29 years, 8 months after Nona's body was found on the shoulder of Interstate 77, investigators arrested Warren Luther Alexander at his home in Mississippi. 12 days later, he was extradited to North Carolina. Warren Luther Alexander was born January 12, 1951. He grew up in Oxnard, California, a coastal city in Ventura County, northwest of Los Angeles. He attended local schools. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam War era. After his military service, he worked as a taxi driver, a man accustomed to picking up strangers. Then he shifted to long-haul trucking, the profession that investigators now believe gave him something far darker: mobility, anonymity, and access to vulnerable people in isolated places. At the time of Nona Cobb's murder in 1992, Alexander was 41 years old. He was a trucker, working routes across the Southeast and beyond. He had no known connection to Nona Cobb. No known reason to have been at that welcome center in Cleveland County. Except that he was. His DNA, found at the crime scene in 1992, preserved for 30 years, analyzed with technology that didn't exist when Nona died, placed him there with near mathematical certainty. What North Carolina investigators didn't fully know yet was what California investigators were about to discover. When Alexander was arrested in North Carolina in March 2022, law enforcement standard protocol applied. His DNA was uploaded to the combined DNA index system, the national law enforcement database known as CODIS. In February 2023, something came back. A match. From California. From 1977. Ventura County, California, 1977. That year, 3 women were murdered in the area around Oxnard and Port Hueneme, near the Plaza Marina shopping center where they were known to work as sex workers. The murders happened over the span of about 8 months. May 1977, Kimberly Carol Fritz, 18 years old. September 1977, Velvet Ann Sanchez, 31 years old. December 1977, Lorraine Rodriguez, 21 years old. All 3 were strangled. All 3 had been killed in a pattern so specific, so deliberate, that the medical examiner at the time noted it would be essentially impossible for more than one person to have committed these crimes. The bodies had been arranged identically, in a position the coroner described as designed to degrade the victims. The case went cold. Generations of detectives worked it. It stayed unsolved for 47 years. Until North Carolina arrested Warren Luther Alexander for Nona Cobb's murder in 2022. When his DNA hit CODIS in February 2023, it matched evidence from all 3 California crime scenes. The man who killed a North Carolina woman in 1992 had apparently been killing women in California 15 years earlier. In the same county where he grew up, where he knew the streets, where he had local knowledge and history. In August 2024, Alexander was extradited from North Carolina to California. He was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Kimberly Fritz, Velvet Sanchez, and Lorraine Rodriguez. He pleaded not guilty. As of 2026, the California case is progressing toward trial. The North Carolina case is waiting its turn. Warren Luther Alexander is not a unique phenomenon. He is, according to law enforcement, part of a category that investigators have been tracking since the early 2000s. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative, launched in 2009, grew out of a disturbing discovery. Hundreds of murders of women, primarily found along or near American highways, sharing common elements across multiple states and jurisdictions. The victims were often in vulnerable circumstances. The crime scenes were often outdoor. Evidence degraded. The killers often crossed state lines, making connecting the cases nearly impossible for any single agency. By the time the initiative launched, VICAP analysts had already identified hundreds of cases fitting the pattern and approximately 450 potential suspects. Warren Luther Alexander, if the charges against him hold, represents exactly how this kind of killer operates. Decades of roots, multiple jurisdictions, different states, different sheriffs, different investigators, each looking at their own piece without seeing the whole shape. North Carolina saw 1 murder on 1 stretch of highway. California saw 3 murders in 1 county. Nobody connected them for 30 years, because they were 15 years apart and 1,500 miles apart. DNA did what geography couldn't. And investigators in both states have said the same thing. They believe there may be more victims, more cases along more routes, more women whose names haven't been spoken yet in connection with Warren Luther Alexander. Somewhere in North Carolina, there is a man who was 3 years old when his mother was murdered. Josh Cobb grew up with his Aunt Vicky and her husband. He grew up knowing what had happened to his mother. and he grew up not knowing who had done it. North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein stood at a press conference in March 2022, 30 years after the crime, and spoke about what the arrest meant. "Sometimes justice is swift," he said, "but other times, tragically, it can take longer." After 30 years, there has finally been an arrest in the murder of Nanestami Cobb. Vicki Gregory declined to comment when reporters reached her after the arrest. She had already said what she needed to say in 1992, when she told the Winston-Salem Journal who her sister really was: a mother. A woman who called every day to ask about her son. A woman who made mistakes, yes, but who also loved her family and was loved in return. The Welcome Center on Interstate 85 in Cleveland County is still there. So is the stretch of I-77 near Elkin where Nona Cobb's body was found. Warren Luther Alexander faces murder charges in 2 states. California is moving toward trial. North Carolina is waiting. For 30 years, the man who killed Nanestami Cobb drove wherever he wanted, lived wherever he chose, and answered to no one. One cold case re-examination, one forensic genealogy company, and one preserved piece of evidence changed all of that. Subscribe if you're new here. New episodes every. Drop a comment below. The names deserve to be remembered. Nanestami Cobb. Surry County, North Carolina. July 7, 1992. Kimberly Fritz. Velvet Sanchez. Lorraine Rodriguez. Ventura County, California, 1977.